Welcome again, everybody, to our March edition of Zoom Seekers. Thank you all for coming back. And we're going to have a lot of fun tonight because our speaker is a sort of a jack of all trades. I always find it very interesting that he runs one of the premier dive operation in Mexico, but he's in Vancouver. So, and he's had boats up in Vancouver as well. But our speaker tonight is Mike Lever. I think on one of the notes I sent out, I did not catch the typo and I called him Mike Level. Um, so he may be level-headed, but it is Lever. And he's the owner of Nautilus. I guess now, Mike, you're calling Nautilus Dive Adventures. And I'm going to do mute all, nothing personal. There we go. He's the owner of Nautilus Dive Adventures, aka was Nautilus Explorer, Nautilus Diving, but they've got the Nautilus Explorer, the Nautilus Bellamy, which, by the way, is the nicest dive boat ever. If you're going to Guadalupe, the most fabulous boat to go on. Nautilus Undersea, which I will be boarding this weekend, along with a couple of you, and we're going down to Socorro to go look for all kinds of good stuff. We'll talk a little bit about that tonight. And they've got a couple of other boats. They do a bunch of destinations. And he's really recently just really gotten into the gray whales, which are in San Ignacio Lagoon, where they have set up a camp. And we're going to sort of start talking about that tonight. But, we may get into other stuff as well. So without further ado, Mike, I'll have you unmute yourself and everybody else can do that kind of a welcoming applause, or if you want to unmute yourself to actually cheer, go right ahead, and then we'll mute you again. But Mike, you've got the floor.
Thank you very much, Ken. Just to correct you, I don't own Nautilus. I rent the boats from the bank.
Well, there is that.
I operate at the liberty of the bank. And I don't know why I'm talking about the gray whales, because I see that our friend Dan is on, who just got back from San Ignacio. And I think Dan has done more has sold more Guadalupe trips than myself and all of our staff combined. So, well, Dan, thank you.
I'll tell you what, Dan, if he says anything that's incorrect, you are empowered to correct him gently. I don't want him to cry.
I will tell you, we had a fabulous time there.
Cool.
Thank you. And if I could, diving is our passion. Diving is what I think all of us do to get headspace, and most of us have been diving for a very long time. But Ken and I talked about this a couple of minutes ago. I need to get spooled up to be enthusiastic about the whales right now. Before this, I was watching CNN, and I need to respect what is going on. The terrible situation in the Ukraine, and it feels slightly off to be talking enthusiastically about vacations when people over there are fighting for democracy and fighting for their lives. I can tell you that I've been in touch with our big dive wholesalers in Russia, and without exception, all of those guys are fiercely supporting the Ukraine and not supporting Putin, and are raising money. We just donated money tonight to the dive wholesaler in the Ukraine, half for medicine, half for arms. If anyone is, and I'll leave this alone in just a second, but if anyone is interested, I will fund match anything anyone wants to donate to the cause over there. So I'll leave that for now and start getting myself enthusiastic about whales. For those who know Tim Means of Baja Expeditions, for 20 years, Tim said, Mike, you got to come to San Ignacio and see these gray whales. And my attitude was always, yeah, no, I'm a shark and manta guy. Why would I want to go and see? No, thank you, but no. And then Tim passed away, and his family, Tim, in his last wishes, and his family asked us to take over Baja Expeditions. And last year, I got to do my first gray whale encounter. And I am now equally passionate about whales, not just the gray whales, but the blue whales of Loreto and the sperm whales. And I've seen humpback whales for a long time, and the orcas that come into the Sea of Cortez. I've rapidly become a whale person. Whales are really cool. They are roughly 125 million years old, or maybe longer, 130 million years. What most people don't know is that whales used to be terrestrial mammals with 4 legs that were weight bearing. They lived on land. Somehow they managed to survive the near extinction of the world with when the meteorite hit the Yucatan. We don't really understand how they did that. And they gradually evolved into the water 25, 30 million years ago and have gone from that terrestrial 4-legged animal into this incredibly sleek, beautiful whale or animal in the water, remarkably well adapted with a very high level of intelligence. And we talk about the intelligence of the mantas and how they communicate with us. And frankly, I think it's the white sharks are in that same, most of the sharks or all of the sharks are in that same level of intellectual interaction. And this is what got me with the whales, is that the first whale that I saw was a mama with her calf, and that mom looked at me from about 15 feet away from where I was in the panga, and she looked at me, and they say you can see God in the eye of a gray whale, because she looked at me and she went, "I'm going to trust you. Do not screw around with my calf." And then she pushed her calf into our boat. And the messaging, the communication, the interaction with the whales, I probably sound like a nut bar, but I sound like a nut bar when I talk about mantas and sharks as well. And that is the amazing thing. Maybe we could start, Ken, with the first slide, and next slide after that. There we go. Oh,
Nope, hang on a sec, because they changed the way they do this now on Zoom. Changed the way they do some of the things. So I'm going to try. I have a couple of ways to try this. There we go. Now I think you want me to roll the video from here, Mike?
can we do the screen capture of the video, because it's just so beautiful?
Yeah, I mean, oh shit, you're not seeing the video. Hang on. That's why I say I have a second way to do that. Let me do it this way. No, that's not
Our fault for making it cumbersome.
No, it's okay. That's okay. Hold on. Where is Alan? There. Give me 1 second. And
So just while Ken is just getting this sorted out, what our camps are located
here we
at
go.
San Ignacio Lagoon. Yeah, I guess we're not really going to get there's a screenshot. Okay, well, we'll come back to that later. There's a screenshot of the tents at night. Under
It's further. There's a drone shot, I know, but it's further in.
No, that's fine. There's the opening, the screen capture is of the tents at night under the Mexican stars, and the stars in the desert. It's inspiring. Can we roll video, please?
We can. So hopefully you guys will all hear this. It's hard for me to tell on my end. It's about a minute long, and it'll get a little ham-handed at the end of it, but here we go.
Dan, if you can give us a thumbs down if you don't hear the music.
She's calling me, like the rainbow. She's calling me, like the rainbow, the rainbow.
Thank you. Next slide, please.
All
So
right,
what are gray whales? These are Northern Pacific gray.
hang
oh,
on.
it's- okay.
That's me. That's me. That's I said,
North.
this is
Pac-
multi-clicking here.
Okay, North Pacific gray whales. The gray whales used to span all the northern waters of the world, the Atlantic Ocean, the Mediterranean, the Baltic. Ah, Ken, you've got it. That's the
Oh, there we
opening
go.
shot. There we go. That is one of the camps at night under the beautiful Mexican sky. Next slide, please.
All right, let's see if this advances. Hold on. Come on.
So while Ken's sorting that out, the gray whales were hunted to extinction in the Atlantic.
Whoop, that wasn't it. We may have to do it this way. No, and I lost it there. All right, keep going.
Okay, the gray whales were hunted to extinction in the Atlantic, in the Mediterranean, in the Baltic, almost hunted to extinction in the Eastern Pacific. The Western Pacific. There is a small population of whales left off Japan and Russia, probably in the neighborhood of 50 to 100 whales. And by some miracle, the whales on the Pacific coast survived the whaling of the 19th century. And the population had rebounded to healthy numbers of between 25 to 30,000 animals. Next slide, please, Ken.
All right, we may have to do it this way.
Okay. This is a lithograph of San Ignacio Lagoon in 1874. There's a whaling captain. His name was Charles Scammon, a very conflicted guy. Actually, he has given us the most knowledge of gray whales. He was both a naturalist. He felt very badly for the whales. He's written a very, very interesting, quite a heavy read about his observations on the whales. But they discovered the birthing lagoons. The first they discovered, the one is to the north, where the salt mining happens up by Guerrero Negro. There's a total of 4 lagoons, and they went from lagoon to lagoon each season. It's very, very tricky sandbars getting in, and they nearly hunted the gray whales to extinction. The whales survived. And just as an interesting aside, the whales were known as devilfish because unlike all the other species of whales that when they were harpooned, they would go to depth and the whale boats would be hanging onto them and putting barrels in the water and trying to exhaust the whale so that it would come back to the surface and do the kill shot. The gray whales were feared by the whalers because they would turn around and they would go after the whalers. They would sink the whaling boats. In San Ignacio Lagoon, the whales turned around, they sank Scammon's boats, they killed 2 of his whalers, they injured a whole bunch of whalers, and the whalers were reduced to being in the shallows, shooting cannons with ropes at the whales, trying to get them. And they were successful. First year, they took a lot of whales. Second year, there weren't a lot of whales left to take. The whales rebounded from that. Next slide, please. And we're left with a population that migrates every year from Bering Sea, Gulf of Alaska. We see them in British Columbia. You do get them off the Washington coast, and they make this 5,000-mile migration down to the 4 birthing lagoons. San Ignacio Lagoon is got the highest density of whales of any of the lagoons. It's a smaller lagoon, and it's the last undeveloped lagoon. We almost lost it in the 1990s when Mitsubishi came in and wanted to build a salt refining process there and build a big breakwater and a long pier and bring in the big deep seas to take out the salt, and that would have destroyed this population as well. And luckily, there was a successful effort to stop that. Next slide, please. So at San Ignacio Lagoon, the campsite is our old campsite. That's from last year. We're over on the other side, on the north side. And people go, should you be in the lagoon? Should you be touching these whales? This is injurious to the whales. You're interfering with their breeding, all of which are very valid points, except that the whale viewing area is a tightly defined area towards the entrance to the lagoon. The baby whales are born at the top of the lagoon. Most of the lagoon is completely off limits to us in terms of interacting with the whales. And the whales, when they're in the mood, there's no question in my mind, they come to the viewing area to interact with us. Interaction is done entirely on the whale's own terms. And the way that this program works, and one of the beauties of it, it's ecotourism at its finest. It's fishing boats, it's fishing captains in these pangas, guys who have been driving pangas since they were 12, 14, 16 years old, making a subsistence living on fishing. And they were given the opportunity 30 years ago to turn in their fishing boat and turn it into a tourist panga and to run these trips. So yeah, we could come in with our own pangas and all that kind of stuff, which is what we do in diving. But instead, this is a cooperative effort where we work with the local panga captains, and they make a lot of money, enough money to look after their families for the year in this great ecotourism effort. So next slide, please. San Ignacio is a beautiful, beautiful place. It's it's called a lagoon, but it's actually quite a deep bay that is completely surrounded by desert. And in the background, you can see the mesas. You can see the Tres Virginas, the three virgins off in the distance that are volcanic peaks. It's spectacularly beautiful. What we're doing here is this was a day when it got too windy for us to be out on the water, and we went exploring. And this is one of the salt flats, and it's beautiful, peaceful, quiet, and Mitsubishi is not there mining it. Next slide, please. This is our new location. So typically what's always happened is that all the camps have been on the south side of the lagoon where you have easy road access. Well, you have road access. It's windy. There's a desalination plant. It's great. It's all very good. But last year, I went over with Sten the Vikingo. We went to the north side to this location in a especially tightly regulated part of the ecosphere, the Biosphere Reserve. And we found this beautiful, soft, sandy beach, sand dunes, salt flat, and it's not accessible by road. It's one of those places that when you get to, everything slows down because it's such a spectacular location. And of course, in my usual way of making life hard for myself, there's no road access, which meant that we had to pull everything in by panga. 3,500 pallets, 5,000 concrete blocks, all the beds, the tents, the kitchen, the generators, everything had to come in by boat. And it's very difficult. We're also, we have to stop whale watching on April 15th. And by May 15th, we have to return the site to its original condition. So everything has to be out. The sand has to be raked, and there can't be any sign that we were ever there. It's very, very low impact tourism. Ken, if we can get ready to play the next video.
We will get ready.
Okay,
You let me know when you want it to roll, because it's about a 3-click thing for me.
okay, so the story on the whales. Everybody was scared of them. They were scared of them until 1972. And the fishermen would stay in the shallows going around the lagoon when the whales were there. They would bang on the bottom of their boats with hammers so that they wouldn't startle the whales, because people thought that these were devil whales that would kill a fisherman if they had the opportunity. And in the 20 years preceding this encounter between a fisherman and one of the whales, that's in fact what they did. There was a census that they used a helicopter, and they were trying to herd the whales with the helicopter, and the whales went after the helicopter, trying to get at the helicopter. It was every effort to interact with the whales resulted in very aggressive behavior by the whales. And that's no surprise. These whales live for 50, 60, 70 years. And there's probably a very living memory of what it was like to be hunted. Whaling happened in the North Pacific until the early 1970s. So there's whales that are still in the lagoon that remember what it was like when there were whalers there. 1972, as you're going to hear in this story, a local fisherman whose name is Pachico, his son and his grandson work for us, work with us. They're delightful. And he said, the way that he told the story was that he was in his boat and this gray whale was right beside him. And he felt this overwhelming urge, this need to put his hand into the water and touch the whale. And he had trouble putting his hand in the water because you don't do that with whales. But he said a force made him put his hand in, and the whale rubbed up against his hand. And that was the first interaction. And he went back to the fishing village and told his buddies what happened, and they all thought he was insane. And over the summer, a couple of other fishermen started touching the whales as well. And that one whale, by the end of the summer, had taught 2, 3, maybe 4 other whales that they could interact with humans. And that then progressed. Ecotourism got involved. There was boats that came down from San Diego. And we believe that probably a quarter of the whales in the lagoon now choose, and it's a learned behavior. They learn the behavior from each other to come and interact with humans. And of course, as humans, we're teaching each other that we can go in and interact with the whales. Okay, Ken, if we can roll anytime you're ready.
All right. Here we go. You're not seeing anything.
Not
And-
quite yet.
Code to phone. Let me try it this way. Here we go.
My great-grandfather was the first person established here in the lagoon for living. That was back in the 1870s, 1880s. My grandfather was born here, my mom, me, and my brothers. My father was the first person that touched the whale in a friendly way. And I still doing this. He had the idea to take people out to watch whale. He started whale watching in this lagoon in 72. And now, 50 years later, this is a big industry here for local people.
My real name is Antonio de Jesus, but my nickname actually is my favorite name is Tony Mayoral. For me and my dad and my grandfather, the whales is part of the family. Every day I'm excited with the whale because I don't know, it's in my blood. This animal is important for me, and I feel my grandpa really close because my grandpa for me is my hero. I don't know, I try to talk to the whales, not with words, I watch the whale, the eye of the whale and my eyes, and I think in the 1969 when my grandpa took the gray whale for the first time, I think the whale say, okay, this is the human, This human changed the world. A little part of the world, but this human changed, you know? So not is a devilfish anymore. Now is gray whales, my baby, my everything.
One question. Because, nice.
All right, stop that.
All right.
One's-
So the next picture is fun. And while Ken's doing that, let me tell you about 1972. That was the year that the International Whaling Commission put a moratorium on whaling. And that was the year that the United States brought in the Marine Mammal Protection Act of 1972. And that's when the whales reached out to us. And sometimes you can understand things and sometimes you can't, and sometimes you can just be amazed by it all. Okay, next slide, please.
All right. Come on. Whoops, come on. Hang on. There we go.
I just find that one amusing.
That's
Okay,
great.
yeah, next slide, please. And this just captures the emotion of what we do with these whales. This woman is a paramedic who was hit really hard by the whole COVID crisis, and she struck us as a very nice person, but we didn't see her interacting with the whales like this, and it just touched her heart. Next slide, please. Crazy, huh? What you're looking at inside its mouth is the baleen, which is how they feed. They're actually different than the humpbacks and the blue whales that only feed on krill. These are opportunistic feeders, and their baleen is slightly different, but they will ingest the water that's full of all the little critters or bigger critters, and then use their tongue to push against the krill. I just don't know of any other whales that will allow you to scratch the baleen inside their mouth. Next slide, please. Beautiful picture. Taken, for those who know Captain Gordon, that was taken with his iPhone of his girlfriend. And it's one of our best pictures of all the professional images that we have. Next slide, please. So, I've talked about the whaling. I've talked about how bad things were. We've talked about the deep emotional connection that people have to whales. But I thought, maybe a time for a little bit of fun too. And I'm going to talk about whale sex, and specifically whale testicles. And even more specifically, the relative size of gray whale testicles compared to humpbacks. So we used to see huge numbers of humpbacks, 1,200 humpbacks down at Socorro Island, and humpbacks have very small testicles. And we would see battles between the males for the privilege of mating. And when you see a 40-ton whales going at each other with those enormous pectoral fins covered in barnacles and raking each other and blasting at each other with vocalization, and you'd see blood in the water. And that's because the humpback whale who mates is because of the small size of his testicles, he's got to make it count. Gray whales are completely different, very large testicles, and they're very patient. And group sex is common. It's common to see 3, 4, 5 male whales waiting for their turn with the female. And it's they call it opportunistic, and I don't know that that's actually the right term, but in other words, whoever has the best sperm is going to be successful with the female, but all the guys get their chance. And that is the interesting thing about gray whales. Next slide, please.
Now, if you're at all modest, hide
don't
your
look at
eyes,
that.
because here we go.
This is what we call the Pink Floyd. and it's quite enormous. We don't actually know why the whale is doing this behavior, because when they mate, it's the other way around. The male is on top, and there's usually a helper that holds the female in place, but the male has to rotate 180 degrees. And just in case you didn't get a good enough view, next slide, please. There you go. Okay, moving on. Let's go.
Oh,
to the
sure. You get
Oh,
them
no,
all
we can-
titillated,
we-
and now you go moving on.
Yeah, well, no. Well, you know what happens when you have a pink Floyd, what you have is calves. So it's very, very interesting. These animals migrate 5,000 miles each way to give birth, to breed, and then to get up to the nutrient-rich waters up north. And when you think about it, the mama is lactating for all that time in the lagoon and the 5,000 miles north, and she's doing it while essentially fasting. They're opportunistic. If there's food down there, they will go for it. And they do sometimes see them scraping on the bottom of the lagoon. But they're with the older whales, the big mature females, they are so big that they can withstand the fasting without any problem. The new mamas, the young ones, they don't have the same fat reserves, and it's more difficult for them. So next slide, please. The calves in the lagoon are so cute. Now, when they're born, they're 14, 15, 16 feet long. They grow at a rate of 60 to 80 pounds a day, which sounds like a lot until you consider that a blue whale grows at that rate per hour. The mamas are initially a little bit shy with the babies, but as they rapidly start bringing the babies, the calves, into the boats, they actually will literally push which is what I saw, push the calf into the boat. They're in the lagoon until late April or May, as the little guys get their strength up and develop habits and are trained because they have to make that long migration, and their number one enemy is orcas. So they have to be wily and smart and strong enough to make the migration. And those are the gray whales of San Ignacio Lagoon. I could talk endlessly about gray whales. There's so much more, but of course we want you to come down and have the experience and listen to our naturalists and so on. Perhaps if we could just roll to the next slide. We have two camps down there. We have a glamping camp and a luxury camp rather. And we believe that if we are going to attract people and they're going to have a great time, we have to have some basic luxuries, which means it might be a tent, but there needs to be hot and cold running water and bathroom and private shower and real beds. These aren't cots, with real mattresses and fine linen and 24-hour power and heat at night and fine dining and all the other things. So it's not a huge hardship to come down and see us, and it's an easy hour 55-minute out of Cabo. Next slide, please.
And what Mike is really saying is we acknowledge that you are all basically wusses, and we're happy to accommodate you in that respect.
But I'm wuss number one. I'm the biggest wuss of all.
You and me both.
I have to plug my CPAP machine in at night.
There you go.
The camp itself, when that first video was shot, you probably saw a lot of mud. This is because the camp is actually built on a flooding salt flat. So for 3 or 4 days a month, this is why we have so many pallets and concrete blocks, is we had to build this high enough to withstand 10 inches of water. It's even more beautiful when the water is in. This is on the north side. You can see the salt flat. This is the two camps, and there's a kitchen or dining tents and a bar tent, and the usual fine selection of craft beer and single malt scotches and wines and so on. That is my presentation on gray whales. What I would like to do is just roll briefly into blue whales. If we could go to the next slide, please. I am always relentlessly excited about new things going on in Baja. and blue whales is our next big thing. For those of you who I owe emails to, it's because I spend too much time on this stuff and not enough time on emails and catching up. The first time I saw my blue whale, it's an experience that I've never forgotten. It was on our way back from Guadalupe, one of the first years. I'm sure Doc has seen many, many blue whales on the banks where they feed off Ensenada. And I'm used to the gray whales of Alaska, the humpback whales of Alaska. And the first time I saw a blue whale, it just went on and on and on and on. They are so big, and they've got this tiny little dorsal fin at the back, and it is just freaking amazing, the giant size. The finback whales, and we have resident populations that we've discovered in the southern Sea of Cortez, they're small. They're only 80 feet long. The blue whales are 80 to 100 feet long. And if you look at this picture, that's a 50-foot boat that the whales are beside, a 52-foot boat. That's how big these animals are. And what seems to be true of mantas and sharks and gray whales and great white sharks, and of course humans, is everyone likes to go to Mexico. Everyone comes to Mexico for a bit of a vacation. And the blue whales are no different. They're solitary animals in many places, but they come into the areas, we call it the Machuto corridor, which is between La Paz and Loreto, closer to Loreto. And they come in and they mate and they breed. And we have interaction with them. We're just learning how to do this. Next slide, please. They are amazing, and they interact with us just like all the other critters of Mexico. Next slide, please, which is a video.
Yep. So let me do this. And then I got to do this and that. And then I do this. Don't you like hearing me narrate all this stuff that makes absolutely no sense to anyone? I think I've got the right one here. Yep. We go full screen.
This is one of our first trips on the Gallant Lady there this spring.
Here we go, guys and gals.
Look under the water. Look under the water. Look under the water. Under the water. He's going right underneath our boat. Oh my gosh, look. He's here. It's over here. Look. Wow. This is the first time I saw them in the water. Oh my gosh. Oh my God. Okay. Look at it. That was the time for your GoPro, we're absolutely certain.
Okay, thank you, Ken.
All right. You know what that reminds me of, Mike? It's like in that first shot of the original Star Wars, where it just keeps coming and coming and coming and coming. It doesn't stop. Hold on, I gotta.
Absolutely amazing. That's taken by a guest with a GoPro. That's not one of our regular videos. We're still working on this program. We will have trips there next. The season is the last week of January through early March. It ties in beautifully with the gray whales. We will be doing introductory exploratory trips because it's a new program, and we will have opportunities to do deeply discounted trips there with Ken next winter as we learn how to interact and work with these gray whales. And then just a couple of wrap slides here. Next slide, please.
Yeah, hang on.
You got to do a couple clicks. Oh, okay. Of course, our one of our favorite animals, the mantas of Socorro. Ken, when you're down there next week, I'm guessing you might see one or two.
Maybe one or two. I'll try to keep track of how many. And in all seriousness, I was telling Mike earlier, the trip we did in January of last year, we saw 18 different manta rays, and I think, as you guys heard me do a manta talk, you check them out with belly spots. That's how you identify which is which is which, but there were days where I think we had the last 3 days, you basically had a manta with you all the time, whether you liked it or not. And everybody liked it.
Okay, beautiful. Next slide, please. Doc's specialty.
There we go.
Guadalupe great white sharks. How did we get that image? We had a drone hovering over the bait. That's how you get that image. Okay. And then just to wrap, we're still spooling up our shoreside day boat operations in Cabo. Between all the different day boats now and the medium-sized boats and the big boats, we're up to 25 boats. These are 2 brand new high-speed 48-footers set up for 24 divers with big dinettes and everything else. These are exactly what you see over in Cozumel and Playa del Carmen and so on. And these boats we're still waiting for the final permits, which in Mexico takes more than a couple of days, but they are going into service in Cabo and San Jose del Cabo. I used to think that diving in Cabo was boring, but in fact, it turns out it's actually pretty nice. And the diving out of San Jose del Cabo, Gordo Banks, we've got a shipwreck, gardens. It's actually really nice diving. One of the boats will also be in La Paz for peak dive season, along with a bunch of super pangas for September to November next year. And that is a brief overview, because I am enthusiastic and to talk for hours, but I wouldn't want to subject you to that. I'm open for questions.
All righty. First of all, everybody well, I'll have to go back so you can, everybody see, I'll make you all, there we go. This is for the Facebook Live thing. I switch back and forth between the gallery view and the speaker view. And the way it works with the question and answer, if you haven't done this before, 2 ways. At the bottom of your screen, there's like a reaction thing where you can do a raise your hand, which I'll see that and means you have a question. Or if you can't find that, you can actually physically raise your hand, and hopefully I will see that. So, and actually, Mike, I normally take the first question, and we were sort of talking about this earlier. But if you want to talk about, like even with Socorro and other parts of Mexico, and actually, Mike, yeah, you got a glare on your lens.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get rid of that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, just tip it down a little bit.
Here,
There you go. That's fine.
I'll just raise this up. Let me try something else.
Okay, I was going to say, and slouch in your chair.
Yeah. I can raise my computer up.
There we go. So you guys are seeing everything, how this works. The PowerPoint doesn't work, so you got to see how it's all behind the scenes. Tonight you're seeing all of our tricks. So the question while you're getting your books in there is whether it's Socorro or it's San Ignacio, you haven't gone to much yet lately, Guadalupe. What have you seen the changes? And I mean, you've been in the Sea of Cortez. I think the first time I met you was, Jesus, it was in the, when did you first go into the Sea of Cortez?
Over 20 years ago.
Yeah. So I was gonna say 20 years.
Working with Timoteo.
Yeah. And so what changes have you seen in these locations over that kind of time, for good and for bad?
Yeah, actually, it's all good. It really is. With the exception of the gray whales, it's all really good. Socorro, when we first started going down there, it was a battle zone. There was no Navy presence. There was illegal fishing. I got myself into a lot of trouble chasing illegal fishing boats. When we would go down there in November for our first trips of the season, we would see 10, 11, 12 drift nets just on San Benedicto that would be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of meters long, and just everything, the hammerheads and the dolphins and the turtles, all the different sharks would all be in the nets. And it was hard. We worked with the Solmar. They were our competition. We worked together to cut the nets and take them back to Cabo, and chased fishermen who had nets all the way around the boiler. That's why we first discovered there's actually thresher sharks there. But I give full credit, Jose Luis, for those who know Jose Luis Sanchez on the Solmar and ourselves. We caused a lot of fuss, and I almost got kicked out of the country. But it changed, and there's a big Navy presence. The illegal fishing was kicked out. Of course, I don't like all the new boats that came in years later, but the more eyes there are on the place, the more enforcement is. And now there's actually someone that you can call when there's a problem. And, as I was saying to Ken, when we first started doing Socorro, I would tell people that, 5 days of diving, you're probably going to have 2 days that are boring. You're not going to see anything, and you're going to wonder why the hell you bought the trip. One day that might be okay, and 1 or 2 days when it would be the magical mantas. And if we saw 4 or 5 mantas on a trip, we were really happy. And the place has become an oasis with the protection. It's an ecosphere reserve. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. There's a Navy base. The Park Service is there. There's mandatory radar transponders on the boats. It's a lot tighter regulations, but it's made a big difference. And the place is spectacular with life now. It's very, very different. Doc can probably talk better to Guadalupe than I can, because he was there right from the very beginning. But Guadalupe is the same. Is that I remember going down there in the early days, and in the afternoon you might see some sharks. It's crazy now that you can do a trip and you will see sharks on every single dive, and you can see 2, 3, 4 sharks. We've seen as many as 13 sharks swimming around the cages at one time. Same thing. It's a stunning change in the number of sharks. The Sea of Cortez, we saw it at its worst as well. In the early days there, El Bajo, for example, is famous for the schooling hammerheads. But I remember we would go there and, sometimes we would see one hammerhead hiding, and you'd be thrilled to see a hammerhead at El Bajo. And the place was under heavy, 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 heavy fishing pressure up until the late 1990s. And they they stopped the contracts with other countries that sent in commercial fishing, industrial size fishing. And it's taken a long time to rebound. But even the Sea of Cortez in the last 3 or 4 years is a different place than it used to be. The sharks are back. We see schooling hammerheads. There's always been big schools of fish, but that's better than ever. The Sea of Cortez is very much come back to life, with the problem that in the old days at Espiritu Santo, there'd be some dive boats there. Now it gets heavy day traffic out of La Paz. And it's the same thing with the whale sharks at Mogote. So there's that limitation. The problems are twofold. One is with the gray whales. And one of the reasons we love to get people down there is to get an awareness of the gray whales and the plight that they're in. There's a degradation of their food source. And it's what we're doing on shore. It's the entire food chain is messed up, and we're seeing emaciated gray whales. And the gray whales are slowly dying off right now. It's probably I'm not going to say it's a natural selection or a natural balance, because I think the cause of the imbalance is induced by us. But there will be an equilibrium with a smaller number of whales than we're seeing now. It's incredibly sad when you see starving gray whales. Gray whales, one of their preferred feeding techniques is they roll on their side and they literally run their mouth along the bottom, sucking everything up and then blowing it out with their tongues against their baleen. And you see these desperate starving whales in San Ignacio feeding on the bottom, trying to get any nutrients they can. And, it's we're part of the problem.
Well, I know for those of you that dive in the Southern California area in the last 5 or 6 years, maybe even 10, we've talked about, we get more down here, humpbacks, blue whales. The whales have expanded south. And one of the thoughts is, and it's sort of the same thing you just touched on, Mike, is that the food sources are diminishing. And so they have to range further and further afield to be able to eat. And, that's just simply not a good thing, to say the least. So who else has a question? Glenn, I can usually rely on you to ask a question.
So I take it you're following the gray whale migration down and the blue whale migration down. I work with Ken at the aquarium, and I know a lot about the cetaceans, and I would like to go one day, but my goodness, I'm so excited. I'm going this week to Socorro, so I would like to jump in the water with him. That's my fear.
Yeah, it's the park has very tight regulations. I believe this is the only place in the world where you're actually allowed by local or national government to interact with them and to touch them and so on. But the controls are tight. We can't get in the water. We can't even use drones over the lagoon. Maybe if I can impose on Dan, can you summarize your experience with them?
Well, I'll tell you, we arrived there at about 10:30 in the morning. We had lunch. We were on the Pongas by probably 12:30. By 1 o'clock, everyone in our boat had touched a whale, hugged a whale, and kissed a whale. I mean, it was absolutely magical.
See, Dan, I thought you were going to say, so then we just turned around and went home. That was good.
Yeah, well, on our boat,
That's
that's
enough.
what we said. If we went home right now, we'd all be satisfied.
Yeah.
And then we had 2 more full days of doing the same thing. And we were interacting with whales every single day. And you're absolutely right, Mike. The mothers would be there pushing the calves up to the boat. And we actually, there were a number of boats who were kind of sort of waiting for their turn. And once we moved away, the whales actually followed us. They stayed with our boat for a while. I mean, it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
If you guys noticed in the chat, Dan made a comment and he used the term, he said, this trip was truly transformative.
It was. It really was. I mean, to be there and put your hand on a whale and look that whale in the eye was something that I will never forget.
Thank
So
you.
Mike,
Whoever that is, keep going.
okay, Mike, so you fly into the dirt airfield, and you're what, bus or van ride to the pickup point with the Ponga, and they run you across the lagoon to the north side?
Yeah, but where the Pongas leave from, it's a 5-minute walk or it's a minute or 2-minute drive in a Suburban. So we're right at the air. We leave right from the airstrip, and then depending on the sea conditions, it's 10 to 20 minutes by Ponga to get over to the north side.
Okay. I do have another question. Did you explore a more direct route flying out of Ensenada rather than in Cabo?
Yeah, because that's typically how it's always been done. But that's how everybody else has done it. But the problem with that is you leave San Diego. It's just like Great Whites. You leave San Diego early in the morning, and then you go across the border, and then you clear into the military base in Ensenada, and then it's a 2.5-hour flight. My feeling was that Cabo is a great destination to go in January, February, March, April. It's a holiday destination. We get a lot of people who come into Cabo, San Jose, La Paz, hang out for 2 or 3 days, do some humpback whale watching, maybe do some diving, or they do a Socorro trip and bump over. And then it's a shorter flight and it's convenient. So we get going at 7 o'clock in the morning. And as Dan says, you're at the lagoon before lunch and you're already out on the water. So I think that, 3 nights in a tent is, it can be glamping or luxury, but 3 nights in a tent, and then it's nice to get back. So we wanted to, if we're going to be there, we wanted to get there and get people out on the water.
Okay. So, in the afternoon, wind blows pretty good there sometimes. And even in the at night. So, in tents, isn't there a lot of flapping going on?
It's an excellent question. Yeah, on the south side last year, my wife deployed to Afghanistan 5 times, and I've got the pictures of the dust storms and all the wind. And to try and get food from the kitchen to the dining tent, we had to park the bus to block the wind. And it was terrible. One of the reasons I picked the north side is that most of the wind blows from that side. So instead of sweeping across the lagoon, you probably get, I don't know quite, but a third, maybe half that amount of wind on the north side. You get a lot of the time on the north side, it's quite calm. The other great thing is that what the Ponga captains, it's quite close to the whale watching area. And what we noticed last year was that the Ponga captains would cut across the lagoon and go right past where the camp is and be going along that shoreline where it's sheltered to get over to the whale watching area. So I think it's a logistical nightmare for us. We bring all the water for camp for 70 some odd people. We bring it in by Panga. It's just Panga's going back and forth with 1,000 liters at a time. But it's not just the beauty of it. It's also there's the wind is much less, and it's close to the whale watching area.
Okay. All right. One last logistical, because I was
going to say we got to get you down there this season before the season ends, so you can see all of this.
I'd like to.
Good. Email me. I'm actually en route tomorrow, but WhatsApp me or email me, and let's get you down there.
All right. I'd like to see what I'm selling there.
Yeah.
By the way, Mike didn't want to make it too commercial, but I'm happy to do that. If you want to do the way the schedules are set up, and you have to sort of look into it and plan it a little bit, but you can do, as he sort of mentioned, a Socorro trip, a Cabo Pomo trip, and because they're leaving from Cabo, dovetail it with one of the San Ignacio Lagoon trips. So it is possible to do those trips sort of back to back, either do the whales first and do a dive trip second, or dive trip and then do the whales. So good stuff. There's a question in the
So I was just going to say, and we do it as a pre or post trip extension. So if you're doing Socorro, then your San Ignacio trip is discounted.
There you go. Even better, because the only words divers like better than discounted is free. I'm guessing they're not free, but anyhow, that's okay. Sophie's got a question in the chat that we may need to define a bit better. She says, when was the first trip you took to the Sea of Cortez? I don't know which part of the Sea of Cortez she's necessarily talking about.
I think it was 2002.
So that answers your question, Sophie. So there we go.
Trip
One more time,
question
Sophie.
was for you,
You
Ken.
cut out. Go ahead.
Again, the question was for you, not for me.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
my first trip to Sea of
the
Cortez was
question,
1988. 1988 on the Don Jose. And
yeah.
had
Yeah, that's
half-
the trip I was with you on that trip.
no, I only had one person on that trip, and that wasn't you. You probably went down the first time. You're probably on second or third, 1990, 91. Because on that first trip, this will give you the background on the retail side of things. I chartered half the boat. I had all of one person sign up, was on the Don Jose, which I loved as a boat, as many of you know. And I had one person sign up, and Gary Cotter, who was the rep for Baja Expeditions, he said, I'll tell you what, I know you had half the boat, but I'm comping your spot. Just bring your one guy down. They'd sold some other spots. He said, because I know you're going to see this one time and you're going to fall in love with it so much that you'll never have trouble selling it again. So I went down for that first trip, had a blast, fell in love with it. And we went down every single year for the next 26 years until the Don Jose stopped running. So it was pretty good. And Gary was right. You go down one time and you will fall in love with the area. Any other questions? Andrea's got a question. For a second, I thought you were falling asleep. You had your hand there like that. So
I have that reaction to you frequently, Ken.
thank you so much. Don't forget, I can kick you out of this meeting. Go ahead.
Oh, the power. I was just wondering, I've been a little paranoid about Mexico for the last few years in terms of safety and security as a tourist. And I was just wondering if any of your customers have had any problems in, traveling to or within Mexico to do your trips.
It's a good question. If you go to the lap dancing joints or you're trying to score drugs, you have got a risk of getting into trouble. If you can avoid those temptations, the narco problems and so on, and the local gangsters, they don't bother tourists in the tourist areas. It's when people get off start going into places that are dangerous that they have trouble.
Thank you.
Jim, I'll put you on the spot. You've usually got a question, Jim. So what's going through your mind?
I had the exact same question about safety. Clearly, we see a lot of it on the news, and I think there have been a lot of incidents in the last 6 months. But it sounds like Mike has answered that question.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
would
can-
just, I would,
Go ahead, Mike.
yeah, the problem in Mexico is when there's a turf war between the drug gangs, and there's been a turf war over on the East Coast in the Playa del Carmen area, and it's the narcos would not go after tourists. The only possible time that there's trouble is if there's a battle and someone gets caught in the crossfire. And we had there was a drug war on our side, I guess about 4 or 5 years ago, and it was just the drug guys going after each other. It never affected the tourists, and that was the only, my time in Mexico, that's the only time it's happened.
I mean, I can tell you from having been down there with, our group last January, and we wandered around the marina and, as Mike says, the tourist areas, and we didn't feel there was any issues or any problems like that. And I haven't been to La Paz in a number of years, but it was the same way in La Paz. So it's,
I mean, it's like going to Los Angeles. If you go into a really tough area, then and try and buy some drugs, you could get yourself in trouble.
yes, I'm not speaking from experience, but yes, you can. So I am told, and so I read in the paper. So last call for questions. If anybody's got any other questions for Mike. Yes, Vinny.
I have a comment. You forgot to mention that Michael's an inventor as well.
Okay, well, why don't you elaborate on that?
Well, if you can see behind me, I have one.
It's a lifeline. And
Yeah.
my understanding is, I think what he printed on one of the packages, I've got the early version, I got the new version, is that if you don't know, Lifeline, is basically a handheld EPIRB that, when you're drifting out at sea and we go, boy, what happened to Marlo and Audrey? I thought they're a little late for lunch. Oh, they're about 8 miles away. I think I saw a thing, Mike, that the listed range was 8 miles, but you did a test that from 40 miles away, the signals can be picked up. That's what I was told.
Okay, so a couple of things. It's sort of like an EPIRB, but what makes it very unique is that it's a marine VHF radio GPS, accurate to 1.5 meters. And the super cool thing is that when you press the button, it communicates with every modern VHF radio around you. So every boat, their radio is programmed to go to channel 16, sound an alarm, flashlights, and it says man overboard or person in distress, and it gives your latitude and longitude, or it will give you steering directions there. That's what's super cool. It's completely independent of any shoreside support or satellites or subscriptions or anything else. Press the button and the boats around you get the help. And I will put in a small plug and say that we've sold over 75,000 of them. And so far we've had almost 70 people write in or contact us to say that we've saved their life.
See, I mean, I think that's terrific. The sad thing is that 70 people weren't paying attention to where they were and drifted away from the boat. But
no, sometimes, boats' engines don't start or anchors don't pull up, or
that's what they say.
Drift dive plans fail.
There's that too.
Plans fail. I mean, I had guys who were off Bon Air, and when they surfaced, there was a big thunderstorm, and their dive boat was worried about the thunderstorm and went into port and left these guys out at the dive site. We had one guy was super cool because they actually had a GoPro on the top of his head, rebreather divers on Evolutions, and they were off the north end of Tasmania. And it was they were diving open ocean, and it was rough, and their boat just couldn't find them. But they pushed the button and someone else came over and got them.
If you guys ever saw the movie, horrible movie, Open Water, based on a true story, but it would underscore to you the value of having something like that there. And I can speak as someone who was adrift inside Rangiroa Lagoon in Tahiti for 35 minutes. I could see the boats looking for me. They just couldn't see where I was. It's nice to have
push the button,
something like that push the button and off they come, or you get people going, damn, he's over there. Now we got to go get him. But whichever way.
Yeah, I always carry mine with me when I'm diving.
Yeah.
A 10-foot safety sausage.
And it's funny too, because I've heard some people say, you know, I might even take it with me if I'm going hiking. I mean, it has multiple uses. So
It's called
all good stuff.
It's called Lifeline.
Lifeline.
And I never go anywhere without my Lifeline. I'm just digging in my briefcase. Ah, there it is.
Bingo.
Bingo.
Now, what I do like, the original ones had a radio function in them where you could talk to the boat. And some of the boat captains were saying that one of their concerns was people would go, oh, that's a long way back to the boat. And they'd set it off and go, could you guys come pick me up? So this one does not have a radio, right, Mike?
No, the U.S. government put iteration 1 out of business.
Yeah.
They outlawed the original Lifeline because they were concerned about false distress calls, which was absolutely ludicrous. They hadn't had any false distress calls. If somebody pushes the button, they know exactly who it is and where they are. But they were worried that with the number of them that we were selling, it was going to plug up the airways, which never happened. So we came out with a plan B, which is what the second generation is.
Leave it to a bureaucrat to come up with a solution for a problem that does not exist.
Or in this case, to come up with a solution that smashes the common sense solution that was saving lives.
There you go. There you go. All right. I think we've exhausted our questions, I'm guessing. I'm looking around. I don't see any hands going up. So again, we can give the applause. Oh, Glenn, did you have an extra question?
So just to reiterate, it's a 3-day vacation and with the gray whale migration and
it's 4 days, 3 nights, but you need to come into Cabo the day before because the flight leaves early in the morning. So you need to budget 5 days.
It's not Gilligan's Island. It's not a 3-hour tour.
Oh.
Just to be clear.
Okay.
So now we can thank Mike very much for.
No, thank you for
coming.
the opportunity, and thank you for letting me present.
And he's actually flying down tomorrow and going down with some of his people, and he'll be there hugging those whales for the next couple of days. And I'll be down in Socorro with a couple of you people. Audrey is nodding her head. Yep. And Marla's going, God, I hope that BC patch she did holds, because he knows if it doesn't, she'll just be off. Next month, April 12th, is the date for the next Zoom Seekers, and we will be having, I don't know if it's Andrew Solomon or someone else, but we're talking about diving at the California Science Center. As many of you know, they have a couple of exhibits that the divers go in. They have a group of volunteer divers, so they will be telling us all about that. So with that, I thank you all for again spending some time with us here on the second Tuesday of the month, as we always do. Thank you again to Mike. So Mike, you can now actually get, what time you guys leaving in the morning?
8 o'clock. Oh, we wheels up at 8 o'clock.
Okay.
Ooh.
And Mike's the one who's piloting the plane, I believe. So you have some work to do tonight. We'll let you get a good night's sleep.
Okay.
Thank you all very much for
Thank you very
spending time
much.
with us. Always enjoyable to see everybody. For those of you, a couple of you doing the Socorro trip with us, I will see you tomorrow night for our Socorro pre-trip Zoom call. And we will wave goodbye to everybody and thank you again for spending some time with Zoom Seekers and Reef Seekers. And we'll see you guys all again soon. Thanks a lot.